I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I've got a pretty big event coming up. My wedding. My fiance, who is 26, has always dreamed of having a wedding in the spring. She loves the idea of flowers blooming and everything coming to life, which I totally get and support, because a happy fiance means a happy life, right? So, we set the date for April, and we've been super excited planning everything. Now, I also have an older brother. He's 30. To give you a bit of background, we've had a pretty standard sibling relationship. Some good times, some rivalries, the usual stuff. But something happened last year that really changed the dynamics between us. One day out of the blue, my parents called me over to their house. They were all mysterious about why they wanted to see me and didn't give me a hint at all over the phone. Feeling a bit puzzled, I went over to find out what was so urgent. When I got there, it felt like walking into an ambush. My brother was there too, and we all sat down in the living room. That's when they dropped a bombshell on me. My brother, apparently with the full backing of my parents, had decided that my wedding was the perfect time and place for him to propose to his girlfriend. Yes, right in the middle of my wedding day. You can imagine how that made me feel. This was supposed to be a special day for my fiancée and me, and suddenly it was turning into a stage for my brother. I was instantly upset and couldn't hide my anger. They all seemed to be on his side, which made me feel like I was being ganged up on. It was me against the three of them, and I felt completely cornered. Despite being outnumbered, I stood my ground fiercely. I made it crystal clear that if they went ahead with this plan, there would be serious consequences. I even said that they wouldn't be welcome at the wedding if they tried to hijack our big day like that. But I didn't stop there. I've been helping out my parents financially for a while now. After college, I landed a decently paying job and started sending them $500 every month to help with their mortgage. They had taken out a second mortgage to pay for my brother's college education, and I wanted to help ease their burden. This was all done out of goodwill, without expecting anything in return. I told them right then and there that I could cut off this financial support anytime I felt it was being taken for granted. The conversation ended pretty tensely, and I left without resolving anything. The very next day, my brother showed up at my place, furious. He accused me of ruining his big chance to propose because now our parents were taking my side and had warned him against making any moves at my wedding. He was really upset, but so was I. It felt like a betrayal, using what should be one of the happiest days of my life as a backdrop for his own agenda. This whole situation really escalated beyond what I could have anticipated. My brother hit me with a real low blow by saying I was financially blackmailing our parents just because he wanted a perfect moment to propose to his girlfriend. He even said he was worried she might leave him if he didn't propose soon. I told him that was his problem, not mine. I was clear that if he tried anything at my wedding, I'd have security remove him. I mean, imagine how his girlfriend would feel, getting proposed to and then immediately thrown out of a wedding. He didn't take that well at all. He threw some harsh words my way and then went and cried to our maternal grandmother, the only grandparent we have left. She's always been kind of a peacekeeper in the family, so it didn't surprise me when she called me, trying to smooth things over. But my brother had twisted the story to make himself look like the victim, which really didn't help matters. Even after I explained my side to our grandmother, she still seemed to sympathize more with him. I got pretty heated during our conversation, and it ended with her in tears, which made me feel awful. Feeling cornered and frustrated, I reached out to my parents again, hoping maybe they'd see how out of hand this was getting. Instead, they were upset with me for the confrontation with our grandmother and for how sternly I was standing my ground. The next thing I knew, my brother showed up at my door again, furious, calling me an idiot and saying I'd ruined his plans. All this drama has been a lot for my fiancée too. She's fully on my side and is just about ready to say my brother shouldn't come to the wedding at all if he keeps this up. It's putting a strain on everyone. And while I started out feeling totally justified in protecting our wedding day, I can't help but wonder if maybe I did push things too far, especially with my brother and our grandmother. It's a messy situation, and now I'm stuck wondering if there's a better way to handle all of this without losing my family in the process. So am I the idiot for everything I did and said to my brother and everyone else? Now for the comments before the update. No, not the idiot. Fiancé has the right idea to follow it. One time coming in, yelling at me would have sealed an uninvite going to grandma after. Yeah, no brainer. Continuing after that is moving to no contact planned. I'm being smart. Let your parents know that your financial well-being is taking priority and that there will be no more aid coming. But you've done enough. It's time for them to manage their finances on their own. That yours will be to make a stable place for your family. Their reaction will gauge if you give them a formal uninvite. My girlfriend will probably leave me, so I'm going to use your wedding, assuming she stays with them that long to propose to her and fix everything. The audacity of some people. Why is your wedding your brother's big chance? You can propose any time. You just have to spoil your wedding to do it. You know your brother will still try to propose at your wedding. Even if security intervenes, it will still create a commotion. Your brother is a piece of work, but let's remember your parents. They didn't want to listen to reason until you threatened to stop giving them money. Now that there would be consequences for them, all of a sudden they switch sides. Also, special pieces of work. Update 1. Thanks for helping me see things more clearly. Making my grandmother cry really upset me, and honestly, I feel terrible about it. I don't usually lose my temper easily. I'm pretty chill most of the time. But with certain family members like my brother, parents, and especially my grandmother, I can get upset quickly. This is mostly because they seem to always support my brother, no matter what, and it feels unfair. My grandmother, in particular, has always taken my brother's side. She believes pretty much everything he says, even when it's not true. Her strong support for him has influenced my parents a lot, which has made them favor him over me for a long time. Just recently, she tried to talk me into letting my brother propose to his girlfriend at my own wedding. When she called me about this, I just lost it. I got really upset and ended up shouting, which I regret, because it made her cry. Now, about why I've been sending money to my parents. About a year ago, they were really close to losing their house because they were still paying off a huge loan they took to pay for my brother's college. They had borrowed a lot of money, thinking it would be an investment in his future, but it put them in a tough spot financially. 10 years ago, when they first needed help, they were too proud to ask me. I didn't want them to lose their home because of their pride or financial struggles. It's not that I want the house for myself in the future. I just want my parents to have a secure place to live. So, I decided to help them out. We came up with a plan that I would send them money until I turned 30. To help manage the situation better, I even got them connected with a financial advisor. Despite this, my brother hasn't been very helpful. He only contributes $300 a month for rent and doesn't pay anything towards other house bills like electricity, water, or gas. A few years ago, he dropped out of college without finishing his degree, which was a big blow because my parents couldn't get back the tuition money they had spent. Now, after all these years, they're finally starting to feel frustrated with him too. Eventually, my brother went back to school online and managed to get a degree, but just barely. This degree did help him land a better job, which is great. But the thing is, after what my parents had invested in his education, his minimal effort and attitude felt like a slap in the face to everyone. Once he got his degree, he expected everyone to praise him nonstop. He's not into bad stuff like gambling or spending recklessly, but he's always been pretty self-centered and tough to deal with. In summary, he hasn't really changed much over the years. He's always been somewhat selfish and demanding, expecting a lot from everyone around him without giving much back. This whole situation with the wedding proposal is just another example of his tendency to put his own wants ahead of other people's feelings or important events. It's been tough dealing with all of this, especially when it feels like the rest of the family doesn't see things the same way I do. Now for the comments before the update. Opie, sorry to say, but you're dealing with much larger issues than just the wedding. Your family has serious issues with favoritism, serious issues with their finances, and serious issues with the entire dynamic. Regardless of the wedding, you really need to cut them off from financial help. Your brother who lives there should step up. $300 is not nearly enough for rent for a grown man. No wonder his girlfriend wants to leave him. He dropped out of school when his parents took out a second mortgage. Good riddance. Why is he waiting until April to propose? Can't. He made the cliché Valentine's Day proposal. He lives with your parents. Does he even have a ring? Or will he need to borrow yours too? For that, he can propose to her on your wedding day at a local restaurant. But since he's so cheap and lazy as you describe him, it doesn't sound like much of a catch. Update 2. Great news. My parents finally backed me up. My dad pointed out that he'd raised my brother wrong, which was on him. So from now on, my brother was to show them real respect when they wanted to get an official list drawn up for him to pay proper rent and utilities. He only paid them $300 a month without contributing to utilities or food. And if he didn't want to pay, he could move out and they'll rent his room to someone else. My brother turned to our mom for help, but she just agreed with Dad. He looked like he was having a conniption and then left the house. He came back a couple of hours later that spoke to no one and locked himself in his room. 2 days later, my brother announced he was moving in with Grandma because she invited him, and our parents told him that if he wanted to live with her, then go ahead. My brother responded by saying, "We all hate him for just wanting to propose to his girlfriend." My parents pointed out that this was not that he wanted to propose, but where he wanted to do it and he got no support for it. So he's refusing to talk to our parents now. My grandmother did try to call me again, but it ended up with me telling her that my brother would not be allowed to propose at my wedding. Plain and simple. So we can get over it or not come. And the same goes for her. I ended up falling out on her favoritism towards my brother since we were kids, which she initially tried to deny. She ended up crying again, then said she won't be coming to my wedding and said she didn't understand why I couldn't let my brother have his way. Before ending the call, my fiance is 100% on my side and is ready to remove my brother and grandmother from the wedding. We've got a good security hired for the wedding, and they'll toss my brother out in a heartbeat. Grandmother isn't talking to my parents either, so my guess is my brother cried to her again to tell her mommy and daddy weren't enabling him anymore, so she offered for him to move in with her. But there's nothing she can do to sway me. My last conversation with her made her realize that I didn't wish to tell my brother's girlfriend, but she called me up on a Saturday. She saw my story online and then realized it might be me with how I described my brother and grandmother. So yeah, now she knows. She ended up tearing my brother a new one, and he still tried to justify himself to her. She told him they were done and all contact with him. My brother, of course, blamed me, even though his girlfriend said that she's been ready to leave him for a while now. And if he tried to propose, no matter where, she'd have told him no. My brother showed up at my place one more time type of state and said he was boycotting my wedding. He actually thought he had leverage that he and grandma won't go. I said I wouldn't miss him and he's in his 30s now and needs to grow up. My parents have cut the umbilical cord and are no longer supporting him, and they're already repainting his room to rent it to someone else. And they plan on renting out my old bedroom because they need the money, after the financial hole he left them in after dropping out of college to mooch off them. They spent the world on him, and he wasn't the least bit grateful that made my brother just shut down and leave. And since then, we've not heard a peep out of him. Now for the comments before the update. Wow. Well, your grandmother will learn as well. I'm guessing you won't pay her and will expect her to cook and clean for him. She's actually doing your brother no real favors, so she won't live forever. Then who will your brother turn to? Unlike so many partners on here, you choose your life partner over everyone else's. Yes, you protected your fiancé. Good job. Have a lovely wedding and an even lovelier marriage. I can't believe your brother is a 30-year-old man and still acting like this. I'm not a lawyer, but I suggest getting a restraining order against your brother. He sounds like the person who will act out. I hope I'm wrong, but I would rather be secure if I were in your shoes. Good Lord, what a nightmare. But I'm glad your parents finally smartened up. And good for you for holding firm. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my girlfriend. And I'm going to propose to her to phrases that, if combined, spell disaster. It sounds like that proposal would have blown up in his face, even if you had permitted him to propose at your wedding. Well, the sound of the girlfriend. She was done with him anyway. She dodged a bullet. Update 3. Well, my grandma called me again to criticize me even more for refusing to let my brother propose. Apparently, he's beside himself with grief over his ex. Yeah. So beside himself with grief that he's already on Tinder looking for a date, which I pointed out to grandma. She claimed that was just his way of coping. I said I didn't care. Then she gave me her classic line of, "I don't understand why." That's what she always says when I won't do something for my brother after he screwed me over. For example, I once gave my brother a loan while attending the online college. He didn't want to repay it, despite promising you would. Even after getting a good job, he had the money. He just didn't want to repay me. So I said I was never going to trust him again. And grandma gave her a line of, "I don't understand why I yelled at her that she did understand. She just acts like she doesn't because she doesn't want to. She's always been on my brother's side no matter what he did. And because of that, she's no longer invited to my wedding either. And I don't care if she cries because I'm just plain dumb whether she made her bed with the side she chose. So now she can live with that." Of course, she exploded in tears, crying like a sad whale and called me a bad grandson. I said she was a bad grandma and I'm sick of her pretending everything was rosy when she used to beat my butt and then told me I'd been a bad boy if I told my parents she'd spank me. I told her not to call me again unless it was to admit the truth and give me a genuine apology. I also preemptively told my parents about what happened, and they responded that they didn't care that I yelled at her anymore because she would never stop siding with my brother no matter what. My parents are doing much better since my brother moved out. They've got 2 rooms ready to rent out and on the market waiting for a tenant. My dad is also working on clearing out the attic to make another room for someone to rent. They're turning as many rooms in their house as possible into livable spaces. They're going to need that rent money to help pay off their debts. And they're still thanking me a lot for helping them with the money I've been sending monthly. My parents sent me down a while ago and apologized heavily for anything that went on from my childhood till now. They said they could offer no good excuses to why my brother was the favorite when they shouldn't have been playing favorites at all. And the fact that I was still willing to help them out, even after everything they've done, made them realize how horrible they were as parents. I've heard nothing from my brother's ex. She wants nothing more to do with my family, and I don't blame her. I checked her social media recently, though, and she seems just fine without my brother in her life. I'll just say good for you. Live well and don't ever let crazy like my brother back in again. My fiance is super happy about me standing my ground because she wanted my brother and grandmother out much sooner. But then she admitted something to me I never knew. Apparently, the few times she was alone with my grandma, she told her all sorts of lies about me that my fiance, I never once believed. She couldn't recall much, but basically, grandma said several things that I remember my brother did that were pinned on me. But the gist is that my grandma was trying to tell my fiance I was a bad egg as a child when she better watch me closely if she decided not to marry me. So yeah, grandma was trying to poison the well with more lies. The fact that old hag was still talking about that stuff to people like my fiance when I was not around infuriated me. So I'm beyond glad I've cut the tumors that are my brother and grandmother out of my life. I don't need them anymore. Now for the comments before the update. I'm so happy to read this. Congrats, man. You got rid of dead weight. Your brother is a narcissistic idiot who plays the victim, and your grandma drank the toxic Kool-Aid. Just wait until she needs someone for help, and your brother leaves her for dead. In a way, she deserves it. Your brother would end up lonely. Your parents learned a lesson, even though it took almost 3 decades. They finally opened their eyes. Live your life. Be happy with your wife to be. Update 4. I knew it, I just knew it. And some of you called it. My grandma couldn't leave well enough alone. She took my brother over to my parents' house. My parents no longer care because the situation opened their eyes some time ago. I wasn't there to see it, but my grandma laid it on thick to my parents about how she'd been thoroughly humiliated by me, and that she didn't understand why I do this over something so trivial as my brother proposing at my upcoming wedding. Well, this next part I never expected my mom ever. The passive doormat to her mother for as long as I can remember. Finally lost it on grandma about how she's a narcissist, and her influence made her and my dad seem like ones too. And they were idiots to let that happen. My parents told them both to get out. My brother especially, they admonished because he'd used them as a veritable ATM for years and barely contributed financially. Grandma, I'm told, left in hysterics, and my brother was silent most of the time. The next day, Grandma called me again to yell at me. I let her have a rant while my fiance and I just let the phone sit on the coffee table while on speaker mode. After a while, Grandma realized I wasn't saying anything back and yelled at me to speak to her. So I said, she's a coward who thinks she's in charge. But she's not, and never will be. She can't boss me around. She has nothing to leverage over me. Then I called her out on the lies she spewed about me to my fiancé, which Grandma immediately denied. But then my fiancé, they spoke up and said she told me everything Grandma had said to her and then asked why she would do that. Did she not want me to be married and be happy or something? And that's when it came out. Grandma yelled that she was angry. I was getting married before my brother. She'd wanted to see him get married first because he's older and her favorite grandson. And she believed the least I could have done was let my brother try to save his relationship by proposing at my wedding. While my grandma would rather spew out any reason she could think of to make my brother the golden boy who can do no wrong. She lied about me just to try and ruin my relationship in her hopes. My brother would marry first, and she openly admitted to having a favorite grandson. Now that's a selfish narcissist. She is. All I could hear on the line was Grandma, loudly sobbing, and my brother trying to console her. He didn't say anything to me. And then the phone hung up. And yes, this time I finally blocked her number and my brother's too. I'm honestly hoping this is where the crap ends. I don't need this kind of drama before I'm married. Now for the comments before the update. Oh my gosh, this update, I didn't think it would unravel so much. Your grandmother is horrible, especially for all the stuff she did. And she admitted to having a favorite. Plus, she wanted your brother to have everything first. That's just sick. I'm glad to hear that your parents finally opened their eyes and stood up for themselves. And you. Okay. But please check if the money you send to your parents isn't impacting the taxes you pay. I'm so invested in this. It's unreal. It's the thread that just keeps giving. Your grandmother prefers your brother because they are cut from the same cloth. I'm glad that you had your say, and that now you've blocked them. But I have the impression that those two are going to try to sabotage or make a scene on the wedding day. Final update. Well, it's been a ride. A fair bit has happened since my last post, so I decided to wait till I was married and settled in after my honeymoon to speak to everyone. Firstly, I want to say that I don't know crap about taxes other than I pay them. But someone here questioned how I could write off the money I gave my parents monthly for their mortgage, and that made me curious that I may be breaking the law. Well, I looked into it, and long story short, the person who was doing my taxes before no longer is. So I took my questions to the owner of the tax firm and explained to him that the guy who was doing my taxes was getting me a roughly one-third write-off on the money I was paying to my parents monthly. Well, The owner said he'd recheck my records himself and said he called me later. Took a few days, but he told me that the guy doing my taxes did a few things he shouldn't have under the previous record of doing this. The firm fired him, and the owner apologized profusely and asked me not to take my business elsewhere. So I told him that as long as my records were clean, I'll stay with them. And he assured me that he'd make sure everything was. I'm going to give him a chance to make everything right. Since my last post, my parents have also managed to rent out both of their spare rooms, both tendency young women who are first-time renters, and they've each taken a room. Both are pleasant enough, but I've barely spoken to them. My parents say they're pretty good tenants, so we'll see how everything goes. Now onto the period before my wedding. Well, my grandma went mental after I told her off over the phone about a month ago. She went further, off her rocker, and lashed out at my brother, which is something I thought she'd never do with how much she loves and enables him. After about a week, the neighbor heard all the commotion and checked on her, and she attacked him over it. Police were called and took Grandma into custody as she tried to attack one of the officers. But she's a frail little old lady with false teeth. Not a lot she can do to them. My parents went in to see her, but visitors weren't permitted until the 3 days were over. And when my parents met with her, she was hamming it up, playing the victim and trying to get my parents back on her side. My mother said Grandma was still blaming me and said she still had a right to be at my wedding. Well, my mother said she lost that right after everything she said and did all the lies and gaslighting and being mad at me for something as petty as getting married before my child's older brother. Meanwhile, my brother was chilling in her house because he had it all to himself until my grandma was allowed to return home. I don't have much information from that point since my parents didn't bother to see grandma or my brother again. Thus far. Next, my wedding. The outdoor venue my wife and I packed was beautiful. There was a good-sized man-made pond with paddle boats and plenty of wild ducks and frogs. The venue was also near a golf course, so kids were having fun hunting for lost golf balls like they were Easter eggs. They actually found a lot of them. So that was some good, wholesome fun. I did have security there. And yes, my grandma did show up and tried to get in. Even though her invitation had been officially rescinded, she still had the paperwork, and she'd gotten in the mail since she refused to return it after being uninvited. My brother wasn't with her, but she drove 200 miles herself just to try and get into my wedding. She showed up acting sweet, but then turned into a crazy witch when the guard refused entry. She screamed out my name and demanded to be let in, and she refused to leave till she spoke to me. Then security threatened the police and she ended up screaming at him and then shuffling back to her car. And that was it for that. But this wasn't the end of the story. Oh no. Because now that the only person still talking to Grandma was my older brother, I guess she started taking things out on him. No family scapegoats left for her to yell at. So she started going crazy on my brother since he was under her roof. I know this because he sent me a letter since I blocked him on everything but snail mail. I got the letter after coming back from my honeymoon. It was a letter with a mix of apologies and blaming me. He said he was sorry for wanting to propose at my wedding and sees how crummy it would have been to try that. And I was right about him being underhanded in asking his ex to marry him in front of so many people. But then he said he was angry he didn't get to go to my wedding because I couldn't overlook his traumas. Then he said he was sorry for letting Grandma treat me the way she did for so long, because now he's getting some of that himself. Then he blamed me for getting Grandma so worked up in the first place over yelling at her and then not letting her into my wedding. He blamed me for our parents, taking them out of their house and being stuck with Grandma because she was driving him up the wall. They didn't kick him out. He left when they wanted him to pay rent properly. Now he's apartment hunting. He did ask my parents to move back in with them, but they outright refused and told him to get his own place. And that's about it on that. As for me, my honeymoon was great. We went on the road and made it to the coast. My wife also insisted we go cycling. Well, I'm not much of a bicycle rider, but it was fun to go a couple of miles down a coast road. We did end up dead tired. Don't need to get in better shape. I'd like to thank everyone here for listening to me and offering their advice. It helped. Now for the comments. Holy crap. What a ride to Opie's brother. You are in your throws out. Grow up. Stop blaming others for your BS and get a life. People go to the most insane lengths to blame anyone but themselves. I hope this whole thing is movie-worthy. Congrats for finding happiness, setting boundaries, and getting revenge on the idiots in your life. I agree. That's quite a neat ending, to be honest. Grandma gets what she needs, rather will hopefully grow up fully. And you too got a happy ending. Glad to hear otherwise that the wedding was great and the honeymoon was too. I hope you have a happy and much less dramatic life together. Just the perfect ending.